My sister cracked crab legs wide open right on my husband's meticulously folded military flag, my daughter simply watching, eating a frozen corn dog. 3 days later, the school district then escorted her boys directly out in front of all. Garlic butter glistened, not on warm toast, but soaked deep into the white stars of my husband's burial flag, flattened beneath a boiling pot of king crab and lobster. The sight choked the air from my lungs, but what truly ignited a searing, cold rage wasn't just that desecration. It was seeing my own daughter, just 9 years old, hunched in a corner, mechanically gnawing on a frozen corn dog while they gorged themselves on a feast I'd paid for. I'd just wrapped up another tutoring session, my voice hoarse from trying to coax algebra into reluctant teenagers. My neck cracked as I rolled it, a familiar protest from hours spent hunched over textbooks. The clock on the wall read 7:30 p.m. perfect. Tonight was significant. It marked 3 years since Mark died, 3 years since the fire took him and shattered our lives into a million glittering pieces. I had brought his memory box with me, that wooden case with the brass latch, holding everything sacred, his burial flag, his firefighter's badge, Penny's crayon drawing of us, smiling. My plan was simple, a quiet ritual, just Penny and me. A walk to the beach after dinner. Candles by the waves. Sharing stories about her daddy. It was going to be healing. It was going to be right. I'd splurged, $100 on 20 pounds of premium king crab legs and lobster from the fish market that morning. A special meal, a silent toast before our private ceremony. I opened the bedroom door, already imagining the delicious, briny aroma filling the rental. But what I saw in the kitchen, it just stopped me dead. Penny was perched on a bar stool far too tall for her, her little feet dangling, swinging aimlessly. In her hands, a paper plate. On the plate, a frozen corn dog, still studded with ice crystals. She was gnawing at it, not eating, but just working on it, barely heated through, the breading pale and cold. My daughter was eating frozen food. My stomach clenched, a cold knot tightening in my gut. And then I looked through the sliding glass door. 20 feet away, on the balcony, sat my sister Brenda, her husband Hank, and their 2 boys. Like royalty at a feast. My seafood. The $400 worth of crab and lobster. They'd cooked it all without me. Without Penny. Tearing into it like starved animals. I could see the mountain of bright red shells piled high, the clarified butter glistening, the corn on the cob I'd also bought. Brenda was cracking a crab leg, pulling out a perfect piece of white meat with a casual flourish. Hank had butter dripping down his chin, his face shiny with grease. The boys were laughing, pushing each other, fighting over the biggest lobster tail. They hadn't even called us. My feet moved before my brain caught up. I was across the kitchen in 4 strides, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding an answer. The humid summer air on the balcony hit me, thick with garlic and Old Bay seasoning, a smell that now felt like a violation. And that's when my vision went white at the edges. In the center of the table, under the massive stockpot I'd brought specifically for boiling seafood, still steaming, still radiating heat, was something that made my stomach churn, bile rising in my throat. Mark's burial flag. The thick, triangular folded American flag that had draped his casket. The flag presented to me by his captain, tears in his eyes, hands trembling, his voice cracking as he whispered, "He was a good man, ma'am." The flag that was supposed to be sacred, protected, untouched. It lay there, unfolded, flattened beneath the weight of that pot. The heat had crushed its careful folds, erased the crisp dignity of its presentation. And worse, so much worse, the pot had leaked. Garlic butter sauce and crab grease had spilled over the rim, puddling on the fabric, soaking into the white stars on the blue field. A sick, yellow-brown stain spreading deeper and deeper into the cotton, obscenely permanent. My eyes darted to the memory box. It was open on the side table, the brass latch bent, broken, splinters jutting from the edge of the wood. Someone had pried it open. The plastic wrapping I'd put around the flag was crumpled on the deck floor, torn. She'd broken into the box I kept on the high shelf, unwrapped the flag, and used it as a hot pad. "What are you doing?" My voice came out as a shriek, high-pitched, raw, barely recognizable as my own. My hands shook so violently I had to clench them into fists, nails digging into my palms. That is Mark's casket flag. How dare you? How dare you use it to prop up a pot? Brenda looked up from her crab leg, completely unbothered, her eyes meeting mine with a placid, almost bored expression. She licked butter from her fingers slowly, one by one. Oh, please, Florence. Relax. She waved a dismissive hand, the glint of grease on her fingertips catching the fading light. I couldn't find a trivet anywhere. I knew there was thick fabric in that box, so I just grabbed it. This flag is perfect. Thick enough it doesn't burn the table. See? She tapped the wood, not even a mark. It'll wash out. Why are you being so dramatic? Dramatic? The word barely made it past my throat, caught somewhere between a sob and a renewed wave of nausea. Hank leaned back in his chair, a lobster claw in his meaty hand, his eyes narrowed. He's dead, Florence. He doesn't know what's happening. Stop overreacting. He cracked the claw with his teeth, a sickening crunch. That badge is just a piece of metal anyway. Let the kids enjoy their meal in peace. His words hit me like physical blows, each one a fresh assault on my already fractured spirit. I looked down and saw Mark's badge on the deck floor, half hidden under Brenda's chair, its silver surface dull with sand. It must have fallen when she dumped everything out of the box. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My vision tunneled until all I could see was that stain spreading across the stars, permanent and irreversible. 3 years. 3 years of swallowing my pride, of bending over backward until my spine ached with the effort. 3 years of being told I needed to rely on family because I was a single mother. This was what family looked like. I thought back. This joint vacation, Brenda's idea, of course. The cousins should spend time together, she'd insisted, her voice sugary sweet. Penny needs her family around her. My parents, Walter and Marilyn, backed her up, just like they always did. Don't be selfish, Florence. Your sister is reaching out. You should be grateful. Grateful. I'd been grateful when Brenda asked to use my address 3 years ago, right after Mark died. Her boys needed to attend the top-rated elementary school in my district where I taught. I'd signed the affidavit of residency, committing fraud on paper, swearing her kids lived at my house when they didn't. I was drowning in grief, too weak to say no because my parents told me it was my duty. Here's the thing about toxic family dynamics: the insidious nature of exploitation often begins with a seemingly innocent request, leveraging a person's vulnerability. This emotional manipulation, especially when backed by other family members, creates a sense of obligation that makes it incredibly difficult for the victim to say no, trapping them in a cycle of compliance and enabling. Then, Brenda delivered the hammer blow 6 months later. We're in this together now, she'd purred, her voice as venomous as any serpent. If anyone finds out about this, you'll lose your teaching license immediately. Perjury on a legal document? That's serious. They'll fire you. So, let's just keep things simple, okay? She'd held that threat over my head ever since. Any pushback, any suggestion that maybe the boys should enroll in their actual district, and she'd remind me, we're in the same boat. Don't rock it. I stayed silent. I needed my job. Penny and I needed that salary, that health insurance. I couldn't afford to lose everything. But standing there on that balcony, watching the grease stains seep into Mark's flag, the flag that had covered his body, the flag that represented his sacrifice, something snapped. Not broke. It snapped into place. The fear that had choked me for 3 years evaporated, burned away by a cold, clarifying rage. I didn't yell again. I didn't argue. I simply bent down, picked up Mark's badge from the deck, wiped the sand off with the hem of my shirt. My hands were steady now, each movement deliberate. I placed the badge carefully back into the memory box, closing the lid over the broken latch with a soft click. I walked past Brenda without a word, past Hank and the boys, back through the sliding door into the dim kitchen. Penny was still there, staring at her half-eaten corn dog, her eyes red. She'd been crying quietly, I realized, while they feasted. My daughter had cried. "Come on, baby," I said softly, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside. I took the plate from her, setting it aside. "Out of the way. Let's make something better." I opened the fridge. Thankfully, I'd bought eggs and bread for tomorrow's breakfast. Within minutes, butter was sizzling in a pan, bread was toasting to a golden brown, and 2 perfect sunny-side-up eggs slid onto plates. I made her hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, a tiny rebellion against the cold, unfeeling world on the balcony. We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us, eating our simple meal in silence. Outside, the laughter from the balcony continued, oblivious. Penny looked up, a smudge of chocolate on her lip. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetie?" "I wish Aunt Lana was here instead." My throat tightened. Aunt Lana, my mother's cousin, who was more a grandmother to Penny than my own mother ever was. Lana was funny, warm, and treated Penny like she mattered. If Lana were here, none of this would have happened. "Me, too, baby," I whispered. "Me, too." That night, I didn't take the memory box to the beach. I didn't light candles. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the stained flag. The yellow grease mark, permanent, obscene, against the white stars. And I made a decision. This ended now. Sleep evaded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pot on Mark's flag. I heard Brenda's voice, glib and dismissive, "It'll wash out." But it wouldn't. The garlic butter had soaked too deep. By morning, dabbing at it with cold water only spread the stain further, bleeding across 3 white stars. Permanent, like everything else Brenda had done. I sat on the floor, the damp flag across my lap, and let myself finally see the truth I'd avoided for 3 years. This wasn't just thoughtlessness. This wasn't Brenda being careless. This was systematic exploitation. My sister didn't see me as family. She saw me as a resource to be used. A free pass into a prestigious school district. A doormat who would absorb any abuse because she was too grief-stricken to fight back. And my parents, they'd enabled every bit of it. I scrolled through old texts, seeing them with clear eyes. How many times had my mother guilted me? "Don't be selfish, Florence. Your sister needs your help. You need family, especially now that Mark is gone." They'd weaponized my widowhood. I knew what they'd say if I called about the flag. "Don't make a big deal. She didn't mean any harm. Let it go." Except forgiveness required remorse. Brenda showed none. I looked at Penny, still asleep, curled around her stuffed rabbit. My daughter fed frozen food while her cousins gorged. Always overlooked, less important than Brenda's golden boys. I'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping my job, that I'd failed to protect her from the people who should have loved her most. I was done surviving. It was time to fight back, but smartly. Brenda still held that massive card, the affidavit of residency. If I confessed the fraud, I'd be fired, lose my license, everything. Brenda knew it. She was counting on it. I needed a bigger weapon. For the rest of the vacation, I pretended everything was normal. When Brenda asked me to split the grocery bill, conveniently forgetting my $400 seafood expense, I just smiled. "Sure, I'll Venmo you later." I never did. She never followed up. She assumed I was too cowed to say no. But while I played docile, I collected evidence. Photos of the stained flag from every angle. Close-ups of the grease, the broken memory box latch, the torn plastic wrap, the empty stockpot. Then the corn dog plate, thawed and shriveled, framed against the dirty dishes from their feast. The contrast was stark. I didn't need these for legal proceedings, but I needed them for me, to remember what was at stake. I scrolled through 3 years of texts with Brenda. Screenshot every mention of the school enrollment, every reminder to keep quiet about our arrangement, every threat couched in friendly language. 30 pages of printed evidence. On the drive home, 3 days before school started, Brenda texted, "Remember to keep your mouth shut. New school year starts Monday. Don't let this affect the kids' education or your teaching position. We're counting on you." I stared at that message for a long moment. Then I typed, "Of course, see you Monday." She had no idea what was coming. That afternoon, after Penny was happily occupied, I made a call. Teachers Union. This is Diane speaking. Hi Diane, Florence Fairfax here. I'm a 4th grade teacher, and I need to speak with a union representative as soon as possible. It's urgent. A pause, a beat of professional skepticism. What kind of situation? I'm being blackmailed by a family member to commit residency fraud, and I need protection before I report it. Another longer pause. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock? I'll be there. That night I barely slept. But this time it wasn't from despair. It was adrenaline, a wild, exhilarating current surging through me. I was terrified, yes, but also invigorated. I was finally taking control. The next morning I dropped Penny at Aunt Lana's. Lana took one look at my face, her kind eyes reading the tension, and hugged me tight. What's wrong, honey? I can't explain yet, but I need you to watch Penny today. Of course. Lana cupped my face in her warm, gentle hands. Whatever you're dealing with, you're stronger than you think. Remember that. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and drove to the union office. It was a squat brick building I'd driven past 100 times, but never entered. As I pulled into the lot, my hands slick with sweat, I knew this was the point of no return. I grabbed my folder, 30 pages of texts, photos of the flag, screenshots of threats, and walked inside before I could talk myself out of it. Diane Miller, a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, greeted me. Miss Fairfax, please sit. I sank into the chair, clutching my folder like a life preserver. Diane folded her hands on her desk, her gaze steady. You said you're being blackmailed regarding residency fraud. Tell me everything. So, I did. Mark's death. The grief, the financial strain, Brenda's request, the affidavit. The moment she made it clear she owned me. By the time I got to the flag, my voice shook, not with fear, but with the raw edge of indignation. I spread the photos across her desk. She broke into my memory box, used his burial flag, his casket flag, as a trivet. And when I confronted her, she told me it would wash out, that I was being dramatic, that he's dead and doesn't know anyway. Diane picked up a photo, studying the grease stain. Her jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in her cheek. And she's been holding the residency fraud over your head this entire time? Yes. I pulled out the texts. She reminds me constantly that we're in the same boat. Diane flipped through the messages, her expression growing darker with each page. Finally, she set them down, removed her glasses, and pinched the bridge of her nose. Miss Fairfax, I need you to understand something very clearly. You are not in the same boat as your sister. The words hit me like cold water, shocking me into a new perspective. What? This is a crucial moment, highlighting the psychological distinction between an aggressor and a victim. What Diane describes is a classic example of coercive control, a pattern of behavior used by one person to dominate and manipulate another, often isolating them and exploiting their weaknesses. By reframing Florence's situation as a victim of coercion and a whistleblower, Diane empowers her and dismantles the narrative of shared culpability Brenda had enforced. You are a victim of domestic coercion. Your sister exploited your grief and financial vulnerability to pressure you into committing fraud. Then she used that fraud to blackmail you into continued silence. That's textbook coercion. You're a whistleblower, Florence, not a criminal. She tapped the flag photos. And this is desecration of a veteran's memorial item. Your husband was a firefighter who died in the line of duty. The district will not take kindly to this. Hope flickered in my chest. Fragile and terrifying. So, you think I can report this without losing my job? Not just without losing your job. I think we can get you immunity. Immunity? Diane nodded, her gaze firm. Here's what we're going to do. I'm personally escorting you to a meeting with the district HR director. We'll present your case as what it is, a veteran's widow being blackmailed by a family member who committed residency fraud. We'll emphasize you're coming forward voluntarily with full documentation, and you deserve protection as a victim and a whistleblower. And if they say no? Diane's smile was sharp, a glint of steel. Then I'm making it very clear that if this district punishes a grief-stricken widow for being coerced, if they fire a teacher whose husband died serving this community, the union will make sure every news outlet in the state knows about it. The PR nightmare alone will force their hand. Something cracked open in my chest. Not breaking, but blooming, expanding with a fierce, quiet certainty. When can we meet with HR? I'll call right now and demand an emergency meeting. With school starting in 3 days, they'll want this resolved immediately. I wandered out into the hallway, dazed, the sounds of the bustling office a distant hum. 20 minutes later, Diane appeared. We're on for 2 o'clock this afternoon. District HR office. And Florence, she smiled, bring those photos of the flag. Trust me, the district HR office was gleaming. Diane and I sat in a conference room with leather chairs and a panoramic view of the football field. When Patricia Morrison, the HR director, arrived, I recognized her immediately. Fair but ruthless, she was known for her unyielding professionalism. She read through my folder of evidence, her expression unreadable. Miss Fairfax, she said finally, closing the folder with a soft thud. This is quite a situation. My stomach dropped. I knew I should have come forward sooner. She held up a hand. You misunderstand me. I'm not criticizing you. I'm appalled by what you've endured. She tapped the folder. Your sister committed deliberate fraud, then leveraged your vulnerability. And this. She pulled out the photo of the stained flag, her gaze hardening. This is unconscionable. Diane leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Which is why we're proposing the following. Miss Fairfax receives full immunity from disciplinary action. She keeps her teaching position and license. In exchange, she provides the district with all evidence needed to pursue action against her sister's family. Patricia considered, her eyes sweeping from Diane to me. If we grant immunity, it sets a precedent. A precedent that protects victims who come forward, Diane countered. And frankly, Patricia, think about the optics. If this story gets out, and these things always get out, how does it look if the district punished a veteran's widow for being blackmailed? A teacher who's worked here for 8 years, who lost her husband in the line of duty. I saw the calculation behind Patricia's eyes. The press would have a field day. The union will make sure of it, Diane continued, relentless. District blames the victim. Widow fired for reporting fraud. You want those headlines? A long silence stretched, taut and agonizing. I held my breath. Finally, Patricia pulled out a legal pad. All right. Here's what I'm authorized to offer. Full immunity from prosecution or disciplinary action. You retain your position and your license. You cooperate fully with our investigation into the residency fraud. She looked at me directly, her gaze unwavering. And you agree not to discuss this matter publicly until the investigation is resolved. Done, I said immediately, the word escaping like a gasp of air. I'll have the immunity agreement drafted within 48 hours. You'll need to sign it before we proceed with formal action against your sister's family. 48 hours. 2 days before school. Perfect. Out in the parking lot, Diane turned to me, grinning. Welcome to freedom, Florence. I couldn't speak. Just absorbed it. Signed by Friday morning. Processed by Monday. Brenda would drop her boys off, confident and smug, walking straight into a trap she didn't even know existed. I drove to Aunt Lana's to pick up Penny. Lana pulled me aside, her face etched with concern. How did it go? It went well, I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. Really well. I can't explain everything yet, but things are going to change, Lana. For the better. She squeezed my hand, her eyes warm. Good. You deserve better, honey. You both do. That night, after Penny was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the memory box. The flag was still stained. That would never change. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the stain was a reminder not of what Brenda had taken from me, but of what I'd finally taken back. My voice, my power, my life. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for Monday morning. By Friday morning, the air felt charged. Or maybe it was just me, the tremor of anticipation vibrating through my bones. I signed the immunity agreement in Patricia Morrison's office, my hand steady, the act official, binding, done. We'll handle the notification on Monday morning, Patricia said, her voice bright and efficient. Your sister's children will be flagged in the system, and when she attempts to drop them off, they'll be stopped at the gate. Security will have the notice of disenrollment ready to serve her personally. And she won't be able to argue. Oh, she can argue all she wants, Diane chimed in, a wry amusement in her tone, but the evidence is overwhelming. Her children will be immediately disenrolled. She'll have to re-enroll them in their actual district. Patricia paused, her gaze meeting mine. I assume you understand that once this happens, your relationship with your sister will be complicated. It's already complicated, I said, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. This just makes it honest. I left the district office feeling lighter than I had in years, as if a great weight had been shed. The weekend stretched ahead, 2 days of pretending while justice ground into position. Saturday I focused on Penny. We organized school supplies, ironed her first day outfit, a blue dress Mark had bought her years ago. She still insisted on it. Are you excited for 4th grade? I asked, my voice light. She shrugged. I guess. Are the boys going to be there? My chest tightened. Brenda's sons. The boys who'd eaten seafood while she'd gnawed on frozen corn dogs. Don't worry about them, I said carefully, choosing my words. Just focus on having a good year, okay? She nodded, but I saw the anxiety flicker in her eyes. She was bracing for another year of being overshadowed. Not this time, baby, I thought. Not anymore. Sunday was quiet. Penny's favorite dinner, spaghetti. A movie night. She fell asleep on my shoulder, and I carried her to bed, her small body warm and trusting in my arms. Standing in her doorway, watching her sleep, I knew everything I'd done for her. To protect her, to give her a life where she didn't have to accept cruelty as the price of survival. My phone buzzed. Brenda. Tomorrow, I'm dropping the boys off early, around 7:15. Remember to come out to the gate and greet us so the other parents see we're close. And don't put on that funeral face you had at the beach. Smile for once. My finger hovered over the keyboard. This was the final test. If I acted normally, played docile one last time, she'd walk right into the trap. If I gave her any hint, she might not show up. So, I did what I'd done for 3 years. I submitted. Me, of course. I'll be there. The morning air carried a hint of autumn crispness as I drove to school, my hands steady on the wheel. Penny sat beside me, her backpack cheerful, chattering excitedly. Mom, do you think Mrs. Patterson will be my teacher again? Maybe, sweetheart, I said, my voice calm despite the adrenaline beginning to pump through my veins. I dropped her off early, before the rush. She deserved a normal first day, untainted. By 7:15, she was safely inside, registered under my legitimate address, her records pristine. Now, I waited in the teacher's parking lot, my coffee growing cold, a clear view of the main entrance. At 7:28, I saw it. Brenda's oversized SUV rolled into the drop-off zone with the confidence of someone who believed the world bent to her will. Through my rearview mirror, I watched her lean back to say something to the boys. They climbed out, backpacks slung. Marcus, the older one, swaggered. Daniel seemed hesitant, a smaller shadow. They walked toward the gate. I checked my watch. 7:29, Marcus reached the scanner first. He pulled out his ID, the same one he'd used for 3 years, and swiped. The light flashed red. The screen blazed, access denied. Marcus frowned, tried again. Red. Access denied. Daniel stepped up. Red. Access denied. Confusion rippled through them. Brenda had stepped out of her SUV now, sunglasses pushed onto her head, her expression shifting from confusion to irritation. That's when Officer Reynolds emerged from the administrative building. Broad-shouldered, unsmiling, his uniform crisp. He moved with purpose. Parents in the drop-off line began to notice, whispering, pulling out phones. Behind Reynolds came Principal Hicks and 2 administrative staff. The principal's face was set in professional stone. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the gate." Officer Reynolds' voice carried across the morning air. It wasn't a request. Brenda's face flushed. "Excuse me. These are my sons. There's obviously some kind of computer error." "There's no error," Principal Hicks cut in, her voice cold and clear enough that parents 3 cars back could hear. "These 2 students have been removed from our system due to residency fraud. Their presence on this campus constitutes trespassing. You need to remove your children immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I watched the color drain from Brenda's face, then flood back in an angry red tide. "That's absurd. I have documentation." "Your documentation has been found to be fraudulent," Hicks continued, unrelenting. Officer Reynolds stepped closer, his hand casually on his belt. "You need to leave now. I want to speak to someone. I want to talk to Florence Fairfax. She's a teacher here. She'll vouch." "Mrs. Fairfax is unavailable," one of the administrative staff said smoothly. "However, this is for you." She extended a large manila envelope. Brenda snatched it, her hands shaking. I couldn't see her face clearly, but her body language shifted from aggressive to rigid as she read. The notice of disenrollment was beautifully crafted, courtesy of the district's legal team and Diane. It laid out the facts with clinical precision: the false affidavit, 3 years of fraudulent enrollment, the calculated cost to the district, and then the bill. $15,000 per year, 3 years, $45,000 total. The demand letter continued. Payment in full within 30 days or the district would file suit. Wage garnishment. Property liens on her primary residence. Brenda's scream cut through the morning like breaking glass. "This is insane. You can't do this." "The documentation has been verified and is in order, ma'am," Principal Hicks stated calmly. Officer Reynolds stepped closer, his hand resting more firmly on his belt. "You need to leave now." "I'll sue. I'll take this to every news station." "That's your right," Principal Hicks said coolly. "However, you're currently in violation of trespassing laws. You have 2 minutes to collect your children and leave, or Officer Reynolds will escort you off the property." I watched Brenda's face cycle through rage, disbelief, calculation, and finally, something close to panic. She grabbed both boys by their arms, practically dragging them back to the SUV. Marcus was demanding to know what was happening. Daniel looked like he might cry. The SUV's engine roared. Brenda peeled out of the drop-off lane, tires squealing on the pavement. I took a sip of my cold coffee and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The trap had snapped shut. The rest of the school day passed in a strange fog of normalcy. I taught. I smiled. I discussed curriculum. No one mentioned the morning's incident to me directly, though I caught whispers, saw curious glances. Let them wonder. When the final bell rang, I collected Penny. She was bright-eyed, chattering about her new teacher, a reconnected friend, an art project. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked as we walked to the car. "Not today, sweetheart. We're going to visit Aunt Lana." Penny's face lit up. "Really? On a school night?" "Really." Aunt Lana lived 20 minutes away, a modest ranch house with an exploding garden. She opened the door before we reached the porch, her silver hair in a loose bun, her smile warm. "There's my favorite girl. I'm your only girl, Aunt Lana." Penny laughed. "Which makes you my favorite by default. Now, I've got fresh cookies cooling. Go sample them and tell me if they need more chocolate chips." Penny kicked off her shoes and bounded toward the kitchen. Lana's smile faded as she looked at me. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says a storm's coming." She gestured me inside. "Come on, talk to me." We sat at her kitchen table, scarred oak, while Penny munched cookies. I told her everything. The seafood, the flag, the fraud, the immunity, this morning's calculated destruction of Brenda's scheme. Aunt Lana listened without interruption, her weathered hands wrapped around a mug of tea. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You're scared," she finally said. "Yes." "Of what they'll do?" "Yes." She reached across and gripped my hand, her touch firm. "Listen to me, Florence. You did the right thing. The only thing. And whatever happens tonight, you stand your ground. You hear me?" "I hear you." That little girl in there deserves a mother who doesn't let people walk all over her. She deserves to see that standing up for yourself isn't wrong. My throat tightened, a fresh wave of emotion. "I know." "Then you go home and you face them, and you don't you dare apologize." She squeezed my hand hard. "You're Mark's wife. You're stronger than they'll ever be." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Penny can stay here tonight," Aunt Lana continued. "However long you need. I'll take her to school tomorrow." "Thank you." "Nothing to thank me for. She's family. Real family." I kissed Penny goodbye. She was too absorbed in coloring to ask questions, and drove home as the sun set, casting long, purple shadows. The house was quiet. I'd left the porch light off deliberately. I wanted them to know I was home, but I wanted them to have to work for it, to have to knock, to have to wait. I went into my bedroom and pulled out the papers I'd printed. 30 pages of message logs exported from my phone. Timestamps and metadata intact. Every text where Brenda had demanded I lie. Every message where she'd threatened to turn our parents against me. Every guilt trip. Every manipulation. Every casual cruelty. I'd organized them chronologically, highlighted key passages, added explanatory notes. The wooden shadow box was heavier than it looked. I opened it carefully. Mark's badge gleamed, his medals, and the burial flag. The grease stain had darkened over the weeks, like a scar. I tried to clean it once, but it barely faded. After a while, I stopped trying. Some stains were meant to be permanent. I closed the box, carried it to the living room, setting it on the coffee table next to the stack of printed messages. Then I sat on the couch and waited. They arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, as punctual as Judgment Day. I heard the cars first. 2 vehicles pulling into my driveway with unnecessary aggression, doors slamming like gunshots. The doorbell rang once, twice, then someone started pounding. I took my time, smoothed my shirt, took a breath, then I opened the door. Walter stood at the front, his face already red with anger. Behind him, Marilyn, her mouth a thin line of disapproval. Brenda looked like she'd been crying, makeup smeared, eyes wild. And Hank. Hank looked ready to commit violence. "You traitor," he snarled, pushing past Walter, his eyes blazing. "You vindictive, selfish, come in," I said calmly, stepping aside. "We should do this inside." They piled into my living room like an invading army, all shouting at once. Brenda collapsed onto my couch, sobbing dramatically. Marilyn pointed an accusing finger at me. Walter's voice boomed about family loyalty and betrayal. And Hank. Hank was the loudest of all. "I'll destroy you," he shouted, his face inches from mine, spittle flying. "You think you're so smart. Your signature is on that paper, too. I'll sue you for complicity, for fraud, for everything. By the time I'm done with you, you'll lose your job, your house, everything." I let him rant. I let them all rant. I stood there in my own living room, silent and still, until their words began to lose steam, until the shouting faded into angry, ragged breathing. I walked to the coffee table and picked up the stack of papers, feeling the heft of the evidence in my hand. "Sit down," I said quietly, a low, firm command. Something in my tone made them freeze. "Sit down." They sat. Brenda and Marilyn on the couch, Walter in the armchair, Hank hovering angrily by the fireplace, his chest still heaving. I dropped the stack of papers on the coffee table with a heavy thump. 30 pages, I said, my voice cutting through the tense silence. Complete message logs covering the entire period of your fraud. Texts where Brenda forced me to sign that affidavit. Messages where she threatened to turn our parents against me if I didn't cooperate. Screenshots of every manipulation, every lie, every time she used my grief as a weapon. Brenda's sobbing stopped abruptly, replaced by a horrified silence. "And this," I continued, lifting the memory box and setting it on the table. The sound echoed in the silent room. I opened it slowly, deliberately, lifting out the flag in its triangular case. The grease stain was visible even in the dim lamplight, a lurid mark against the solemn fabric. "Do you see this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "This is what you did. You took my husband's burial flag, the flag that was draped over his coffin, that was handed to me by his commanding officer, and you used it as a potholder for your seafood feast. 20 pounds of king crab and lobster that I paid $400 for, while my daughter ate a frozen corn dog." Marilyn's face had gone pale, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Florence, we didn't mean, don't." The word cracked like a whip, sharp and sudden. "Don't you dare tell me what you meant. You knew exactly what that flag represented, and you didn't care." I set the flag down carefully and picked up the papers again. "I have an immunity agreement from the school district, obtained through my union representative. I reported the fraud myself. I am not legally liable for any of this." Hank stepped forward again, a fresh wave of aggression on his face. "That doesn't mean I'm not finished." I met his eyes, and whatever he saw there made him stop mid-sentence. "If you attempt to sue me, if you attempt to implicate me in your fraud, if you so much as threaten my job or my reputation, I will hand every single one of these messages over to the police and the district attorney's office." The room went absolutely silent, so quiet I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. "Blackmail is a felony in this state," I continued softly, my voice cold, precise. "Forcing someone to commit fraud through threats and coercion, that's blackmail. The prosecutor would have a field day with this evidence, timestamps, context, a clear pattern of manipulation. And given that the fraud involved public education funds, they take it very seriously." I let that sink in, watching the color drain from Hank's face, his bravado crumbling. This pivotal moment demonstrates the power of setting clear, firm boundaries, especially in cases of prolonged manipulation. Florence, by presenting undeniable evidence and articulating the legal consequences, effectively disarms her aggressors. This act of self-advocacy is a critical step in reclaiming personal agency and breaking free from a cycle of victimhood, providing a powerful example of how standing up to coercion can shift the balance of power. "So, here's your choice," I said, my voice calm and cold as winter water. "You can pay the $45,000 the district is demanding. You can avoid having a property lien placed on your house. You can end this quietly and walk away." Brenda made a choking sound, a desperate, broken whimper. "Or," I continued, "you can try to fight it. You can sue me. You can make noise, and I will bury you with evidence that leads to criminal charges. Wage garnishment will be the least of your problems when you're facing felony blackmail charges. Do you want to pay the debt and keep your house, or do you want to spend time in prison?" The silence stretched so long I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, a relentless march of seconds. Hank's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning. Brenda had started crying again, but these were different tears, hopeless, desperate. Walter looked like he'd aged 10 years, his shoulders slumped. Marilyn stared at me like she didn't recognize her own daughter, her gaze a mixture of fear and bewildered betrayal. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. No one moved. "Get out." They left in silence, filing out like mourners at a funeral. Brenda could barely walk, Hank supporting her, his face a mask of defeat. Walter and Marilyn didn't even look back. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I walked back to the living room, carefully folded the flag back into its case, and placed it in the memory box. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally breaking through the cold control I'd maintained. I sat on the couch and let myself shake, let myself feel the weight of what I'd just done. I had burned every bridge. I had gone to war with my own family, and I had won. The house felt different in the days that followed, lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't fully recognized had been lifted. I moved through the rooms with a strange new awareness, noticing details I'd stopped seeing. The way morning light fell through the kitchen window, the sound of birdsong. The absence of that familiar anxiety coiled in my stomach. Penny came home from Aunt Lana's house full of stories about baking cookies and learning to knit. She seemed unbothered by the brief stay, treating it as an adventure. Children were resilient that way. Or perhaps she simply trusted me enough not to ask too many questions. The call from Brenda came 7 days later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. I put the phone on speaker and continued chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic thud of the knife a steady counterpoint to her voice. "Florence," her voice was hollow, scraped raw. "We're selling the car." I said nothing, just kept chopping. "The Audi. We're selling it and Hank's truck, and we're borrowing money from his parents. We have to pay. We don't have a choice." "No," I agreed quietly. "You don't." A long pause. I could hear her ragged breathing. "The boys are enrolled at Riverside Elementary now," she continued, her voice flat. "It's the school we're actually zoned for. It's not like your district. Riverside Elementary. Underfunded, overcrowded, test scores that made parents wince. The kind of school families tried to fraud their way out of." "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, and meant it. Not sorry enough to change anything, but sorry nonetheless, the way you might feel sorry for someone who'd walked into traffic. "Are you?" Brenda's voice cracked, a glimmer of her old self breaking through. "Are you really?" "Yes. But I'm sorrier about what you did to Penny, what you did to Mark's memory. So, this doesn't change anything. Florence, you can't just cut us out." "I can. I am. Goodbye." I hung up before she could respond and blocked her number immediately. Then Hank's, then Walter's and Marilyn's. The knife felt good in my hand as I returned to chopping vegetables. decisive, clean, final. The email from Walter came the next day, forwarded to my work address since I'd blocked his personal communications. I read it once quickly, then deleted it without responding. Subject line, family meeting request. Body full of words like overreacting and forgiveness and we're still your parents. As if biology trumped behavior. As if DNA excused cruelty. I emptied my deleted folder and returned to grading papers, the past firmly confined to the digital trash. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of silence, of peace, of rebuilding our lives on our terms. Then the letter arrived from the school district. Not a threatening letter this time, but a notice of acceptance. Penny had been admitted to the gifted and talented program based on her test scores and teacher recommendations. She'd earned it on her own merit, through her own hard work, with no fraud or manipulation required. I taped the acceptance letter to the refrigerator, right at Penny's eye level. When she got home from school, she saw it immediately and squealed, her face alight with pure joy. "I got in, Mom. I got in." "You did?" I said, grinning, my heart swelling. "All by yourself. Because you're smart and you work hard." She threw her arms around my waist, hugging me tight. "Can we celebrate?" "Absolutely. What do you want to do?" She thought for a moment. "Can we have Aunt Lana over and make that fancy cheese seafood thing you saw on YouTube? Lobster thermidor?" "Yeah, that." I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Deal. I'll call Aunt Lana right now." That evening, the three of us sat around my kitchen table. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 people who'd chosen to be family to each other. I brought out the dessert, lobster thermidor served in individual ramekins with a golden, bubbling cheese crust. "Fancy," Aunt Lana said, impressed. "Where'd you learn to make this?" I figured if I paid $400 for seafood I didn't even get to eat, I might as well learn to cook it myself, I said, placing the dishes down. Penny dug in enthusiastically, getting cheese sauce on her chin. Aunt Lana savored each bite, and I sat there at my own table, in my own house, eating good food with people who actually loved me, not a frozen corn dog in sight. Aunt Lana raised her water glass in a toast. To Penny, for being brilliant. To Mom, for being brave, Penny added, mimicking the gesture, her eyes bright. They both looked at me expectantly. I raised my glass, feeling emotion well up in my chest. Not grief this time, but something else. Something that felt like hope, like solid ground beneath my feet. To family, I said quietly. The real kind. We clinked glasses, and Penny giggled. Later, after dinner, after Aunt Lana had headed home, I stood at the sink washing dishes while Penny did homework at the kitchen table. The evening light slanted through the windows, warm and golden. This was what peace felt like, I realized. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of people who loved you without conditions. Not the silence of suppression, but the quiet of contentment. I'd spent 3 years as a widow, and before that, years as the family scapegoat. I'd been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who showed up and sacrificed and swallowed her pain for the sake of keeping everyone else comfortable. I'd been a victim of my own people-pleasing, of my inability to say no, of my desperate need to be loved by people who only loved what I could do for them. Not anymore. I dried my hands on a dish towel and glanced into the living room where the memory box sat on the mantel. The flag was visible through the glass, its stain a permanent shadow across the fabric. Some people would say I should have tried harder to preserve it, to keep it pristine and perfect. Some people would say family was worth fighting for, worth forgiving, worth keeping in your life no matter what they did. Those people were wrong. The stain on that flag was the price of my freedom. It was the mark of my revolution. It was proof that I'd finally learned the lesson Mark had tried to teach me years ago, that some things, self-respect, dignity, the safety of your child, were worth more than keeping the peace. I'd burned the bridges. I'd paid the price. And I'd walk away from those ashes without looking back. In the living room, the memory box caught the last rays of evening sun. The flag's grease stain, visible and permanent. A scar that would never heal, and didn't need to. Some wounds are meant to be kept, after all. In a world that constantly tells us to forgive and forget when it comes to family, how do we determine when the cost of maintaining those relationships outweighs our own well-being and the safety of our children?